Hello, everybody. My name is Anna Campoverdi, and I am the director of the Joseph A. Onanoy Latino Institute. The Institute provides scholarships, cultural programming, and professional development to students across campus. So to learn more, you can go to our website. We'll be dropping that into the chat box. But tonight, we welcome you to our African Diaspora, Black Identity, and Colorism panel, or ABC panel for short. This year's panel is themed Family Matters, a two-part series that will have a special emphasis on family structures in the Black and Afro-Latino communities. Tonight's discussion will highlight the complexities and dynamics of race and colorism within a family structure, and on Thursday at 7 p.m., we will discuss gender and sexuality. We encourage you to use the chat box feature to drop your thoughts, comments, and questions during the panel. And I would like to thank all the student organizations that joined us in supporting this event, and a very special thank you to the team of students and staff who helped conceive, design, and plan these discussions. I'd now like to ask Dr. Forrest Pritchett to lead us in prayer and tell us a little bit more about the university's Black History Month committee activities.
Thank you, Anna, and I welcome everyone else also on behalf of the university and all of the staff, faculty, and administration. We have had a very aggressive year, um, really, when we think back to downsizing ourselves and transitioning during COVID. And then after a period of reflection, I think many of us were recommitted to the concept of making our university come alive even in a period of sheltering in. And consequently, under our leadership, Dr. Shauna Cooper Gibson and Majid Whitney, we began to pull together all of the persons at the university who were really interested in a full commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our university-wide committee on DEI rolled out an emphasis on Heritage Months. And I believe we started with our Latino heritage in the fall, rolled through the end of the year with our MLK Day activities into African American History Month, and rolling right into Women's History Month. And pretty soon we'll be up to the Asian Pacific Islander Month. But we say all of that to say this is the way we believe God has created all of mankind, that we live in peace with one another, and that where we have difficulties, we learn how to resolve it peaceably. We did not create this earth. This is God's creation. And who are we to try to tear it up, tear relationships between people, tear up physical environment? We all need to learn how to be more respectful of all of that. I'm very proud to have been a source for the Onanoy Institute several years ago when this series, the ABC series, started. It's a very difficult topic that is undertaken every year, but it is one that is really needed, and we need to have mature discussions. After all, Seton Hall University is a part of higher education. So why should we lower ourselves with the kind of values that tear us all apart? So let me make one final comment before we get to a prayer. As we look at the nature of colorism and how it affects us individually and as in our families, really, the root of colorism comes in a procedure to stratify our societies. It's not man-made, it's not given by government. It really comes from an evil designs that people have to see to it that indeed, that the wealth of the land, opportunity and privilege won't go to everybody, even though our Constitution says we all are equal under it. But wealth and income can be unevenly divided if someone keeps us focused on smaller types of things. So we need to understand that colorism at its root is a social construction. For example, and this may be somewhat offensive to many, but it will be informative to others. If we look back European history, we will see that terms like whiteness, for example, were not used to describe people by their identity. Geo-national concepts were being used, so that people were European, they were Italian, they were British. It isn't until we get the development of the North Atlantic slave trade that we begin to get this artificial emphasis upon what is white and what is not white. So we need to understand that whiteness is indeed historically a socially constructed concept. And for the most part, it's used to set it apart, if you would, from what is considered to be socially the opposite of light, which is going to be dark. So for the reality is someone needs to have the darkness to emphasize the whiteness, if you would. We should not play into that game, and we can know better, because when we look at recent work of archaeologists, we all know that human DNA started and evolved out of southeastern Africa. So maybe that could be a topic for a future discussion also. But the way God would have us all work together is that we would be honest and we would not play into this division, because ultimately what can happen if one is not a critical thinker, one will begin to believe that they indeed are inferior, and that because their skin is a little lighter than someone else's, that they are better than someone else. The reality is when you play that type of a game, you are lowering yourself in the eyes of others. So it'll be our prayer tonight that through the various presentations, there will be enlightenment. We'll all leave here tonight as brothers and sisters. Let us all now, I know we have many prayer traditions which may be present at the university, but I ask all in our common respect for one another that at this moment, we open our hearts to this word of prayer. Good and gracious God, we invite you to recognize and help us to reverence your divine image and your likeness in our neighbors. Enable us to see the reality of racism and free us to challenge and uproot it from our society, our world, and ourselves. This we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchett. Spencer?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Pritchett. Good evening, everyone. My name is Spencer Hinton, and I'm the former graduate assistant at the Joseph A. Unanue Latino Institute. Firstly, I'd like to thank the panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to speak with us this evening. I'd also like to thank Dr. Kelly Harris, who we're honored to have serve as moderator in the first panel of our first ABC panel double feature. Dr. Kelly Harris is the director of the Africana Studies at Seton Hall University. His areas of expertise include Black politics, African politics, Black political thought, African American history, and the history of social science. His most recent publications are The Search for a Black Political Science, The Epistemology and Relevance of Mac Jones in the National Political Science Review, and number 45 in The Persistence of White Nationalism, and Not Our President, New Directions from the Pushed Out, the Others, and the Clear Majority in Trump's Stolen America. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Anna, and the other organizers for putting this together. It's a very important discussion. And so, point of information.
Dr. Harris, you muted yourself.
Am I introducing the panelists?
If you'd like, or we can go around and they can introduce themselves.
Okay, all right. So let me just jump into it, because Reverend Dr. Pritchett did a good job beginning us off on where we need to go with this discussion. First of all, I want to emphasize that this discussion of colorism, it really is a multi-generational discussion, and that goes really back to the roots of conquest, colonialism, and neocolonialism. So now in the outline, people know that Alice Walker is the one who is associated with coming up with this concept of colorism, but the term really was in use before Alice Walker coined the term or popularized the term. Scholars have been talking about colorism in the 1970s and some even in the 1960s. Now the practice also, this becomes a big issue in the Black community. One of the earlier works that dealt with it was a work by Nella Larson, and I encourage you all to read Nella Larson. She was writing during the Harlem Renaissance. She wrote two books, one Quicksand, the other Passing, both dealing with this colorism piece about a Black woman trying to pass and about Black people trying to pass and what that looks like on internally and externally to our community. The other work, of course, is by Toni Morrison, in which many of you may have read in high school. Those of you who really went to really good schools, you might even read it in junior high. Now we're talking about The Bluest Eye, which really gets at the colorism piece and what that means. But the other thing that we want to emphasize and we're going to touch on tonight is how colorism isn't just an American thing. It is a global thing. As we have the expansion of the creation of the African diaspora, we also have the creation of these internal contradictions, right? Dealing with these issues, dealing with self-esteem issues. And that's what we're going to get at tonight. So I want to begin the discussion by actually sharing a story. My own interaction with colorism when I went to the Dominican Republic. Now, for those of you who may not know this whole history, the Dominican Republic shares an island with Haiti, the island of Hispaniola. Haiti is where you had the Haitian Revolution, which is still the only time in human history, or only time in recorded human history, where a group of enslaved people had a revolution and won and took over the whole country. So the Haitians had their success in 1804, and the Haitian Revolution were led by some dark-skinned Negroes. They took over the country in 1804. Then in 1822, they conquered the other half of the island. So they had the whole island of Hispaniola. They ran the Dominican Republic side for 22 years. And that caused a lot of consternation in the Dominican side, and they grew not to like the Haitians. Now, the Dominicans had been colonized by the Spanish. The Haitians were colonized by the French, right? So fast forward to 2007 or 2008, where I, Dr. Harris, in my role as a director of international studies, go visit the Dominican Republic with a colleague who spoke Spanish to set up an international studies program, an exchange program. So we get there, and my colleague has to get some foundation. She goes into a store. So she's buying the foundation, and I see her having this back and forth with the lady at the counter. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm just a dumb American. I'm just looking like, just smiling every time the lady looks at me, because the lady keeps looking at me, and I'm wondering why she's looking at me. So after my colleague comes out and she gets her foundation, I said, well, what was happening? And she said she kept telling me that the foundation I was buying was too dark, that it was going to make me too dark. I was like, wow. And she was light complexion, right? Later that day, we go to a museum. We visit their National Museum. And we're getting a tour, and they show us the stuff they have for Haiti. And on the Haitian side, it's very dark. They had these slats. You had to really squint and look through these slats to see the artifacts from Haitian history. And remember, the Haitians are proud of their African heritage. On the Dominican side is bright, is lit up. The stuff is on, the artifacts are on satin pillows. They're showing it all. So I asked the person, I said, well, why is it like that? And they said, very honestly, they said, well, we're very proud of our history in the Dominican Republic. We're proud of our Spanish history. And we like to show that off. The Haitians are proud of their African history. We're not proud of that heritage. We're not even proud of our connection to Haiti. So we keep that stuff dark and stuff. They said, and we acknowledge that's a problem we have to deal with. Now, from that, I noticed too that there was a story in the NPR, a reporter was in the Dominican Republic talking about colorism in the Dominican Republic. This was about 13 years ago. The reporter was saying how not only is it a color issue, but also that people are ashamed of their noses and their other African features. And that's the point I want to get us off to in talking about tonight, that the colorism is not simply a color thing, but it's also a thing about hair texture and African features and other things, right? So I want to get us started right now, and I want to go to our panel, and I want to start with Tanelli, and I would ask Tanelli to introduce herself, but we're going to begin with the first question that we want to pose to Tanelli and other panelists, and I asked them to introduce themselves, is, how does your culture, community, or family perpetuate colorism? And what behavior, sayings, practices, or attitudes have you seen that push Eurocentrism and whiteness. How is colorism disguised in your culture? And with that, I will pass it over to Tanelli and the other panelists.
Thank you. Thanks for the explanation. I thought that was like really awesome, all the info that you shared. Not an awesome circumstance, of course, but we're learning about the truth. And so first, let me introduce myself. My name is Tanelli. I am a senior at Seton Hall, and I'm the president for the Black Student Union. I'm a biology major and Africana Studies minor. A little bit about me: I'm born and raised in Jersey, but I'm first generation. My parents are immigrants from Haiti, as are a lot of my family members who live like cousins and stuff. And so I'll just get into the question kind of and what you talked about, Dr. Harris. So for one, I think with the Dominican Republic and Haitian example, you see how like people with similar roots have two different perspectives of like cultural pride. And for one, it's not just something that's isolated with like between races, so colorism, or between cultures, but also within cultures and within the same group of people, basically. I have heard of many examples of how Dominican people and Haitian people have had certain conflicts because of things like colorism and those types of clashes. I'm thankful that my family hasn't experienced too much of that, and I actually have like good experiences with Dominican people, and I have Dominican family members as well. But some of the experiences are really at the root, like colorism, racism, so a lot of times Dominican people will, or like those that are colorists, I should say, will basically they'll basically glorify European standards and European features, basically physical features. So whether that is fairer, lighter skin, or the structure, as they said, the structure of the face, structure of the nose, how your hair looks, things like that. And so oftentimes, even within cultures that have more Afrocentric features, you'll also see that giving glory to those type of European features. Within my family structure, I think an example that I've definitely seen is my mother. She's a dark-skinned woman, and she had a sister who was only 2 years younger than her, who was light-skinned. In total, the siblings, it was 6 of them, and her sister, same parents, same family, grew up the same way. But her sister was basically highly praised for being light-skinned, and she especially experienced that treatment from her mother, and she was basically called like pretty and given more like opportunity. She went to a different school than like the rest of the kids did. All the rest of them were dark skinned. And to see that type of experience even within like the same family structure. So sometimes you'll see it as like really explicit, and sometimes it'll be a little bit more subtle. So I think it manifests in many different forms. So yeah, that's one of the ways.
Thank you. Joel, please introduce yourself and tackle that first question for us.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, guys. Joel Paulino. I am the brand director for Douce Cognac at Bacardi, and that's a joint venture with Rock Nation. So, I mean, it's a loaded topic and a loaded question. So, I'm first generation American. My parents are Dominican. My dad is Black Dominican, like very dark. My mom is white, very white. I grew up kind of being ignorant to colorism and being so focused on advancing our potential in America that it wasn't until I married my wife who's Black, and we have a 2-year-old son, and everything happened last summer where we started to talk about these things, and things clicked in my head, and I started to view it less so from my individual experience, which has been essentially, focus on school, focus on work, set a good example, and try to contribute in your community whichever way possible, to like, wow, I step into my wife's shoes, learn her experiences, and now look at my son as a father and know that his experience isn't going to be mine. He's not going to have the ability to be ignorant to colorism like I was. Now he's a colored Black and Dominican boy, and I don't have the answers to be able to like guide him, in society. And so this summer was like a big aha for me to like, I'm not ready. Like, what do I do? And I think it also opened up conversations with, my parents, and discussing race and my son. And, the conclusion I had as things came up, um, even around like Haitian Dominican politics. And I'll share one personal example just to illustrate the idea. So um, the I kind of saw a parallel between Mexican immigration headed to America, and then the Haitian Dominican immigration headed to Dominican Republic. And I believe the law in Dominican Republic is that if um, it's not like where you're born, I think it's like by bloodline descent, and that's like been the law for a long time. And Dr. Harris, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not an expert in this, but as I was talking to my dad about it, his answer was like, well, that's like the Constitution, and that's how it's been. And my perspective to him was like, sometimes the Constitution's written by humans, and the Constitution isn't always, we have the ability to change it to what's right. But through that dialogue, one of the big ahas that I had is like, coming from a place of empathy, if I put myself in his shoes, and what he was taught through whatever socio political world he lived in, which, by the way, in the 60s, the Dominican Republic was under a dictatorship heavily influenced by America, which is white. And then all that stuff starts to trickle down, and you live those experiences. And now fast forward, I'm his son, and he's lived that in life, and he's telling me this. With that empathy in mind, I know I've walked his path, and I know that I can't necessarily get him to make a switch just like that, because he's lived that experience. But I can start having those healthy conversations and dialogues, so that as he evolves in his experience, he can start to broaden. But that's kind of like a personal example of how it shows up. I think
Thank
I
you.
kind
That's a
of
good
tend to
example.
default to like a place of empathy. I don't know if it's like my marketing training, or as a marketer, you always start with, why is this consumer or person thinking in this way? And then try to help bridge the gap to like where I think um, that person can evolve to.
Thank you. Sister Ali, share your story and answer that question for us.
Sure. So my name is Allie. I am a missionary in campus ministry, and I'm from Texas. I went to Texas State University, studied sociology, so that's kind of my background. I am Black and white, and I didn't experience colorism in my family specifically. Yeah, they're just really loving people, like both sides. And so I never experienced that within the family. However, like going to school with my friends and my peers, I did experience colorism, but in the sense of like I was the light skin of the group, so I would get those jokes at me. And it's like interesting because it's like the other side where like the light skin jokes are like, oh, like you're the pretty one, or like you have the good hair and that kind of stuff. But I still experienced feeling like I was on the outside because of it. And I just realized that it was kind of a put down for me and for like whoever was saying it, because they were like excluding me by saying these things, but then also kind of like saying something about their own skin color, how they felt about it. And so it was just, yeah, an interesting dynamic. So that's my experience.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, Ghana, you're an interesting case because your name is Ghana. And so there was some kind of, in your family, some respect for Africa and African culture and tradition. So could you speak to your experience and who you are, share with people who you are? Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. My name is Ghana Imani Hilton. That's my full name from birth. I spent my entire life in New York and New Jersey. Most of my family's in New York and New Jersey. Um, they are my ancestors, enslaved Africans who migrated to North Carolina and then New Jersey. So 3 generations in Jersey at this point. So North Carolina is not where I connect to, although my grandmother made the food and I loved it. So I had that. But I'm definitely a Jersey girl. My parents were in the struggle, in the Black Panther, March on Washington, the whole thing. So blackety black, black, black. And my mother, who raised me, all of my friends call her the education parent. And they call her that because as much as she wanted a good school system for me, I went to school and was raised in Montclair, New Jersey. And she made sure that I had a very rich Afrocentric history in any way she could. I went to museums and libraries and programs and celebrated Kwanzaa since birth, named after Kwanzaa. Um, so I had an interesting experience of being exposed to a lot of African culture and history through my mother, who, by the way, was also a professor at Rutgers. Um, but being raised in a suburb of New Jersey that was very Eurocentric, even in its Black population, um, who I will say, and this is not as an insult, more assimilated into the culture than represented Black culture. So names Judy and Jane and John, going to church, press their hair, etc. At Seton Hall University, I am the Director of Scheduling and Operations, which means I assist with events in several buildings and more. Also do communications and a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So that's my role here. Um, because I was raised blackety black, black, black with the name like Ghana, I had a very interesting experience growing up where some people who had knowledge of what Ghana is and what that means would approach me in one way, like, oh, your name is Ghana, like after the country. And I said, yes. But most people, including a lot of my Black and Hispanic brothers and sisters, were very confused about my origin because of my name and would insult me as if I was from Africa. And I took that very hard because as a young person, I was confused too. Like, I am from Africa, so I don't know why you're insulting me about being African, but I'm from Jersey. So I had a lot of solidarity with Africans that I met through the years, people who were first generation from Nigeria or what have you, or Haiti, because I got teased in the same way that they got teased initially, at least, until people figured out. So there's a cultural piece to this as well as a racial piece. And I will share this one story and then pass it on to the next person. Um, I went to North Carolina once for a family reunion when I was young. I happened to be a very good student when I was young. I got straight A's, and my mother was always bragging about it. And several people in North Carolina said, well, yeah, she's got all that white blood in her. Of course she's smart. And I didn't get it when I was 6, 7, and 8. I get it now. But I was at the time, I was like, what does white blood have to do with it? I worked hard for those grades. I studied. But because of my light skin, people assumed certain things. So I feel sometimes my parents were not biracial, but I sometimes feel like I'm in that slot of like being misunderstood. People saying, you would be pretty if it wasn't for your nose. And like the black part of me, the black feature is not attractive to other people. Or you talk like a white girl. Who do you think you are, from my own people? And I'm like, well, I'm just speaking English. So I've had a lot of conflicting um, incidents within my life. But once people get to know me and know why my name is Ghana, they know I'm blackity black, black, black. So on
Thank,
that, I will turn it over to someone else.
thank you. And to close out this initial one, Sister Moji.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So my name is Moji Adesanya. I'm a sophomore at Seton Hall. My major is social and behavioral sciences. And on campus, I'm involved with the Minority Association of STEM Collegians. I am the treasurer, and I'm also a resident assistant. And I'm a member of the Bacino Leadership Institute. And just a couple things that I do there. I'm in charge of the selection committee, the selection initiative, and the diversity and inclusion committee. So yeah, so with this question, I feel like this kind of pertains to my situation to some extent, and a little highlight about Nigerian culture. I am a first generation Nigerian American. Both of my parents are immigrants. And there's a Yoruba word that I've heard thrown around like all my life, and it's called Oyibo. And from what I've gathered about the meaning of that word is that it kind of just has to do with whiteness. So there was this really light skinned girl that I went to church with, and my mom would, every Sunday, my mom would see her and say, okay, Oyibo girl. And that's just something that's stuck around. And even some of my family members will kind of tack that word onto me because of how I speak and how I act. And it's like, I don't appreciate that my mannerisms, I am 100% African. What does the way that I speak or act have to do with whiteness? It's not related. And then over the years, like being younger, in the summertime, me and my brother, our skin would get darker because we're spending so much time out in the sun. And my mom and my dad would be like, okay, you guys have to scrub harder. You guys are getting dark. You have to scrub your skin when you're in the bath. And I was like, okay. And even my brother, I'm using him as an anecdote, but in high school, he always had darker skin than I did. And for a while, he got into like the whole skin bleaching thing. I know that a lot of countries, and Nigeria in particular, have a really big skin lightening, skin bleaching industry. And that's something that I was exposed to from like my adolescence because my brother was a few years older than me. I know that every month or so, my mom would buy him the soap and that he would use the soap and his skin would get lighter. And for a while, I was thinking, okay, I think I should use that too. 'Cause my skin should be lighter too, right? And then, but there was chemicals in it, so that's the only reason why I didn't use it. But it was kind of just the fact that I thought to myself, okay, that makes sense. Let me lighten my skin. This soap, it'll make me look prettier. And it's just things like that. Luckily for me, I grew up in Union, New Jersey, which is a really diverse town. So I didn't have to deal with the aspect of not being represented or being the only one that looks like me. But I feel like every public school had this, just calling every Black person like an African booty scratcher and, clicking at them, clicking at them, and just a lot of other ridiculous stuff. And that really just perpetuates the idea that a lot of people have about Black people, and it's not right. It's not right at all. And in my family and my culture, colorism is perpetuated a lot. One, because of that Oyibo word that I've just heard thrown around all this time. And people, for whatever reason, our society has a really high value on whiteness and what it is. And so if you have that high value on whiteness, then the effect would be you devalue Blackness. And that's kind of just something that I've had to come to my own terms with. I used to, in middle school, everyone has that phase where they are always like straightening their hair. Luckily for me, my mom never permed my hair. I only ever had texturizer. But for all of middle school, my hair was always texturized. It was bone straight, but it looked god awful. And luckily for me, I was kind of able in high school. I was like, okay, my hair's not supposed to do that at all. Let me take care of my hair. Let me do something good about it. I grew up with my mom having permed hair. Her hair was always straight. And for years now, I've been saying, okay, I want a perm. That's better. It's going to look nicer. And I like, luckily for me, in the past few years, like I've kind of turned around and been like, wait, okay, I don't want a perm. My hair doesn't need to be straight. And if anything, I'm kind of gonna flip the status quo because my professional pictures, they all have been my natural hair. If I'm going to have a meeting, I would prefer to be my natural, authentic self because I shouldn't hide who I am or kind of go with the flow and just straighten my hair for someone else because I shouldn't have to hide who I am. And Blackness isn't something that should be hidden. It's something that should be celebrated. And that's my kind of 2 cents about that subject.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. When you were talking, you made me, as soon as you began, you reminded me of one of my favorite writers, and her name is Marita Golden. Well, Marita Golden wrote a book called "Don't Play in the Sun," one woman's journey through the color complex, and I encourage everybody to read that. But Marita Golden is an excellent writer. That's just one of her books that she wrote that's pretty good. All right. You also made me think about something else, which gets to this identity question. You know, there are different ways people deal with their identity, particularly when they feel like they're being assaulted. Now, one way to deal with it is to have low self-esteem and to internalize it and to want to change your features and your complexion and the skin bleaching and all that kind of stuff. Another way to deal with it is to make people pay by striking out at the rest of the world, for looking at you in a particular way. But with that said, I want you all to talk about what does your Black identity mean to you? What does it mean to you? And how does that play out? And anybody can jump in and answer that first.
I could go. For one, I talked about this recently too, at an event we had last week. But honestly, my Black identity, I just appreciate it and love it so much. And I'm really, really thankful for everything, all the experiences, everything that has brought me to the point of just like loving myself. And I just feel really proud of who I am, of my background, of how I look. And I think part of that, number one, part of that confidence came from understanding that I cannot expect everyone to like me for who I am. I cannot expect that people will appreciate me for who I am. But I'm gonna go where I'm celebrated and not tolerated, especially. And then also, really embracing my uniqueness. Like your superpower, everyone's superpower is that there is nobody like you. Like there is just you. So everything about you is absolutely beautiful. Everything about you is unique, is just amazing, you know? And so yeah, I just embrace that a lot more. I really love being me. I love my culture. I love the things that it's gifted me with. Um, I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful for that in general. Yeah, and also like on that point too of people like kind of belittling your identity and what you look like or whatever it is. I've also learned to disregard people who have those type of like bigoted thoughts against you. I've been given comments like that, you know, the pretty for a Black girl, or oh, like she's pretty, so oh, what are you mixed with? No, I'm Black, I'm Haitian, I'm just Haitian. You know, I'm not mixed with anything. Yes, I'm pretty and I'm beautiful and I'm all that, and you could have left it at that. And yeah, you know, you just gotta acknowledge that sometimes people will give you a lot of backhanded compliments, or they'll just straight up insult you. And really, their opinions do not matter. It does not define you for sure. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I
Thank
have
you.
never felt ashamed of being Black, and I know some people have. I think I'm lucky because of the way my parents and my family raised me. I have always had pride in my race. And there were some points in my life that I felt like I was in the matrix, like I knew something that other people didn't know because all of the Black culture and Black stories and Black history that I knew to be true was not in the textbooks, was not talked about by others, was not shared in school, etc. So I definitely thought that, like, there were times when I was like, is this like a secret club? Are Black people is supposed to be secret that we are so like dope and so like incredible? But now that more people are learning about it, and especially allies who come up and say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know about Black Wall Street, or I didn't know about, the Tuskegee Airmen, or I didn't know about this," and I'm like, yes. So things are coming to light that I knew my whole life. So I've always had that pride. And whenever someone was contrary to that, I just felt like it was because they didn't know the deal. They didn't know the deal, and one day they would, and so I just kept it moving like that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to tackle that?
Something that comes to mind for me with this question is just the idea of radical self-love. Like Selene said, you're really bringing some good points home, but I'm the only me, and no one can be a better me, and I can't change anything about me. Those are just some of the things that I kind of had to tell myself and that I had to tell other people, because no matter what I look like, I'm still going to be the best version of me that exists. You're gonna like me regardless. I'm gonna do what I came here to do, and you're gonna love it. And so, just that form of confidence that people have to build for themselves, if it's already lacking, it's important to build, and it's kind of essential for people to have, especially in the world that we live in that doesn't put a value on blackness. And whether you're black, white, everyone says yellow, purple, no matter what color you are, who you are, radical self-love is a term that everybody should be familiar with. And it's something that can really just help kind of pull you up from your bootstraps and be the best version of you, no matter what the culture or society dictates based on what you look like.
Thank you for that. Now, Joel and Allie, you can answer that, but we can we can start with you on the next question.
Let's go to the next one. Self-love. Because I think what they all said, it really resonates for sure. And I mean, for me, my own experience is I kind of discovered that I'm Black, like probably, and appreciated that like a couple years ago. But like even to this day, I still have questions on like how does that, like, am I Black enough for certain people? Am I not? I don't know. But at the end of the day, like, self-love, and as I've gone through my career, not sacrificing who I am, the haircut that I get, the like how I show up, and in times that I feel that people aren't accepting me for who I am, then that's when I know that that's not the right place for me. Um, so yeah, so
So you started touching on a part of this, what this next question deals with. How has your perspective on your Black identity changed from childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood?
yeah, so that's a really good one. So like I said before, growing up, I was kind of never thought about color, never saw it that way. Very focused on my grades and always looked at career progression and success as a way to improve my family outcomes. And being the older son of two, and having an appreciation for the fact that my parents migrated to a new country, and I'm like, that's like they did a lot. Like, I got to put that on my shoulders, and I gotta do some things with that. So that's like growing up. Fast forward, as an adult with my wife is Black. We I had to like figure out, like, and she would we had really great discussions actually, because her idea of Black was kind of like that I wasn't Black, because she had gone through a lot of experiences in her family that I hadn't. And so we had a lot of healthy discussion around, you know, like I know that how other people might view me, um, but everyone's Black experience is different. And so understanding each other's Black experience and how it showed up uh, is really the healthy thing to do, but also like welcoming other Black experiences, because there's not just one. I'm really appreciative of the African American movement and what everything, the civil rights stuff has happened that kind of unlocked the rights for other, you know, Black cultures. But I think a lot of times in that mix, it's hard to like know, like, I don't know, is that me? Is it not? Am I included in that?
Well, you know what, Joel, you're talking. I'm curious, and now, Ali, I want you to talk about this as well, and the other panelists. Because you're married because you and your wife have had different experiences, do you find yourselves reacting to things differently? Are some things she more sensitive to things than you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. So to the point, I mean, sometimes like when my wife watches news on TV, like she feels it way more and she'll like break down and like, cry on my shoulder. And she, some I don't have the same reaction. And sometimes she interprets that as like, hey, do you not love our culture? But through talking and figuring out, it's not that, it's that my experiences have been different. So I just feel it different and I view it from a different mindset. Um, so yeah, I mean, I like through going through the experiences, I see it. Like, it's like, wow, like I grew up ignorant to my black color, to how others perceived me, and and I have the mindset of like I go anywhere and like I'm gonna do whatever, and it's like me, and I'm confident and stuff. But she doesn't always have that mindset because her experiences have been different. So it's just
Okay.
eye opening, and it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ali?
I just want to note from what Joelle was sharing how important conversations are in talking about people's different experiences and their blackness, because I feel like I've been in that place like his wife where it's like if someone doesn't react in a certain way, then I'm like, okay, so does it not matter to you kind of stuff? So that was just something I wanted to know. But as far as like how I have grown in like my perception of self and my Black identity, when I was little, I didn't think anything of race. Like it wasn't like something that was like in front of me for a long time. And then in middle school, that's when other students started to be like, okay, well, if you have to pick black or white, like which one are you? And it was like ridiculous. And so that was kind of when I started to think about myself in these two different perspectives, and like would feel that I wasn't allowed to be black and white. Like, nah, you got to choose. And I did experience more acceptance in like black circles. And so, but then because again, I'm light skinned, my like people would have like try to check me like, oh, you're not really black. Like, look at how you talk, look at how you look. And so that was when like there was a long period of time, and I'm still working on this, where I like wanted to be darker because I wanted to be accepted. And so yeah, like summer I was out in the sun like trying to get as dark as I could. And I began to realize in college that like in the same way that I don't want my dark skinned brothers and sisters to wish that they were lighter, I shouldn't want to like be darker. And honestly, like learning about yourself and learning your history and your identity, I believe it should give you the confidence to like be who you are, as Tinelli and Moji were saying. And also something that was really important for me in my journey of like accepting and loving myself was recognizing that I believe in me perfectly intentionally the way that he wanted to. And so, like in the winter, I look like white chocolate. And then in the summer, I look a little more caramel. Then like, that's what it's supposed to be. And like both colors are beautiful. So yeah, I'm still working on that journey. Like I haven't made it, but
Well,
we're getting somewhere.
it's interesting because people think a lot of things through ignorance. If we understand the African continent and African culture, you're going to see all shades. Mm-hmm. It's indigenous to Africa. It has nothing to do with the white man coming on Africa or anything. That Africa has all shades. So people are a little bit ignorant about that. We're going to throw it open to the audience for questions. So we're going to ask the audience if you have any questions that you want, you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I would like to throw this out and for us to consider. In our planning, we talked about racial dolezal and what that means. We mentioned Sammy Sosa in my class. We talked about Sammy Sosa tonight, Lil Kim. But another thing that I want us to think about too is, even this is a different way, but Barack Obama. How Barack Obama was treated and looked at, and why he was accepted in some circles and in others may not have been. But at any rate, we'll throw it to the audience and see what they have to say, if there are any questions.
I think, Dr. Harris, while we build courage, I was able to pull out a couple of questions. We have one from Bell and Gamara that says, I think, Ghana, you already answered this in the chat, but for the rest of the panelists, how do the speakers respond to people who commit microaggressions that they have mentioned?
I feel like the best way to handle microaggressions is kind of just shake it off. Some people are really just ignorant, and I've gotten mad, I've gotten upset. Like in elementary school, there was a girl that would just tease me relentlessly, not only because of like my skin and my hair, but because of my heritage and something as petty as my name. And I was like 10, so obviously I got really upset over it. And as I grew up, got older, the microaggressions didn't stop. But what I had to realize is that I could take control and I could take the onus of how I would respond to things. And so the best way to react to microaggressions is to not give them any reaction at all. Because if you stop adding gas to that fire, hopefully, slowly it'll go out. And at the end of the day, you know yourself best. If you know that what people are saying is not true, you should not react. And another thing that was helpful was just surrounding myself with people that are not only like-minded, but people who look like me. It wasn't until I came to college that I realized like the importance of, one, having a diverse set of friends, but two, having a few friends that look like me, because having people that look like you can just validate your experience, because you realize that you're not the only person that's going through this thing. And it's just kind of a point that you can come home to and be like, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, that's super important. And just to build on that, because I think as you exit college and go through a career, a lot of times you won't be able to control your environment and who's in the workplace. And so there's been times where um, I've kind of confronted or been more direct about it. And one example was with my boss at one time, not my current company, but a prior one, where I had torn my Achilles and I was limping at work, and I had a crutches and everything, and he asked like, hey, who's going to work on the World Cup campaign, and that was a part of my job. And I was like, oh well, it's me, I'm up for it, like let's do it, I'm down. And he said, well, what about your foot? And I'm like, what about my foot? Like, I don't work with my feet, I work with my mind, and that's why I'm here, so I'm doing it. And our relationship was never good, and there were a lot of other experiences that made me make the decision to leave that organization. But it was at a point where I'm like, he has to know where I stand and that this isn't okay. So that was just an example that I felt was like, I had to let him know that what he just said was not good. And that's how I kind of handled that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to tackle that?
I definitely agree with the disregarding, negative comments, especially about things that you simply can't control and are literally just you being you. And also, I think checking our own biases is important too. Like when I think about like the Black community, for example, I'm definitely glad that like Ali brought up the point of like feeling like she wasn't accepted in certain situations, because it definitely helps me to sympathize more with different people. We all have like privilege in one way or another, and it manifests in different ways. So, for example, for me, because I look more stereotypically Black, like darker skinned, right? Even though we all know Black people come in many different shades. I'm not like questioned about like, oh, okay, like how Black is she? That type of thing. Like people aren't questioning like, oh, what are my roots and stuff. And so if somebody tells me they're Black, no matter how they look, who am I to be telling them like, oh, looking into their family history and trying to figure out, oh, but are you really Black? But is your dad Black? But which family member do you have that's Black? Who am I to really be doing that? And what's the point, honestly? Like, if you tell me you're Black, okay, you Black. All right, cool. We look different. We all look different. So like the fact that people even think that we have to look one type of way, really like invalidates the experience of being Black. The identity of being Black. And so, I definitely try to be sympathetic in that way and understanding that, like we all have different experiences as Black people,
Very true. Very true. And share a lot of similar experiences as well. And anybody else want to tackle that? Or do we have any other questions from the audience? Anna?
Yeah, we have a question in the chat box, but I did see that someone raised their hand.
Okay.
So let me go over. And Brianna, would you like to get off mute?
Hi. So before I ask my question, just for a little basis, all of your experiences kind of just reminded me of one that my mom had told me about. So she grew up in Jamaica in all her life, and she went to school in Jamaica in the 80s. So she was telling me specifically about this story about a math teacher that she had that favored the light-skinned students higher than like the brown-skinned, dark-skinned students. And it was literally such a huge divide. Like she would pay no attention to any of the darker-skinned students, not even answer questions, anything like that, but she would praise the lighter-skinned students. And at that time, my mom, if you would see her now, she would probably be like brown skin. But in Jamaica, like how it's everybody's outside all the time, it's great weather, so she's probably a little bit darker back then. So have you guys ever experienced anything with colorism in education, either higher education or anything like grade school level?
Anybody can tackle that.
Well, my mom had a similar experience as well. Like she told me about how when she was in school, she went to school in Haiti, like as a child, and I think it was like a parade that they were doing or something. And so I think it was the principal who was like choosing girls for the parade, just to, like be demonstrators and stuff. And he like would specifically choose like all the lighter skinned people, all the people he thought he deemed beautiful, So yeah.
What's interesting, in considered one of the more radical Black organizations, the Nation of Islam, if you look at their leadership over their history, is that leadership always looks a particular way.
Mm.
I don't know if people notice that, but the leadership always looks a particular way. And if you think about national Black leadership in this country, there are very few times you will see a nationally accepted leader that is dark.
Mm-hmm.
And that still is the case.
Stacey Abrams just spoke about this in an article. She said she was advised to change her hair, lose weight, do many things that would take away from the beautiful woman that she is herself, and she refused to do it. I think that one of the most radical things we can do is be ourselves. I am not assimilating. I'm being me in every way, shape, and form that I can be me. Um, I have a defense mechanism of a smile because of the angry Black woman syndrome that is in the world. So I find that if I say it like this, you hear me and you understand what I'm saying. And that's what I use instead of getting a perm or, and I understand, especially in the career before, I was at Seton Hall, I was in human resources, I did the hiring. And I had dreadlocks I had 3 different sets of dreadlocks, but 17 years with the same set of dreadlocks. And, I had comments about it in the outside world. And I'm like, my name is Ghana. I have dreadlocks and I keeps a job. So what does that mean? There is a standard of presentation that we must all do. Nobody's going to come to a job interview looking raggedy, right? Even if you have a expensive suit and a perm and all of that. But You can come to a job interview with your locks looking beautiful and your however you dress, you come and dress. And I understood that sometimes to get my foot in the door, I may have to tone something down a bit, but wait till I got up in there. Now it's over. It is important for us to have positions of power at every level. At every level. I was the gatekeeper for the resumes, right? So that means instead of someone who's taking your resume out because it has an African name, I'm leaving it right in there because you're qualified just like John Doe, right? So I'm presenting to the manager all the qualified candidates, whether they be whatever they are, whatever gender, whatever race, whatever culture. So because of me, more others got jobs than if someone else might have been in that position and filtered it out. Because of a cop who's black and from the neighborhood, he's going to diffuse certain situations that a different cop might not. Because of a teacher that spoke life into you, they're going to supply you with something that maybe another teacher either didn't have the resources to or didn't have the information to, right? So the most important thing that we can do as Black people is be in every single, there is no job too small or too large for us to take on. We've got to be in rooms where decisions are being made so that we can institute all of these changes. And it's not even big changes. That's the thing that trips me out. It's just holding people accountable to what they say the standard are. Oh, you want somebody with a master's degree? All these brothers got master's degree. Let's
Right,
pick one, right?
right, right.
So that's kind of how I feel like we need to roll, just
Well,
the
Ghana,
way you
Ghana, you
are.
have campaign staff and volunteers developing in the chat, and you also somebody's also getting a TED talk ready for you. So get ready. Let's go to Alfonso.
Hi, I'm gonna turn on my camera so you guys can see me. So I actually have a question for like all of you guys as well. I just want to say thank you guys for hosting this professional panel. It's really like eye-inspiring for me just because I am a Filipino American, so my experiences is not always going to be the same as the person to the left or to the right of me. But I would like to just say, like, even in my own community, in my Filipino community, we do experience a big sense of colorism. And we mentioned here earlier tonight that colorism is, in essence, like it sometimes can be generational. In my family specifically, colorism is very like evident um, between like my parents, like my grandparents. So I know we talked about earlier, how do we deal with microaggressions towards like colorism, but then how do we also talk about, I guess, taking out those like those racist and anti-Black ideals out of people who are our loved ones, especially in regards to colorism?
Good question. Who wants to tackle that first?
I can try to tackle that question, especially when it comes to loved ones. I know it can be difficult because you want to love them, you're trying your best, but at the end of the day, their ignorance isn't helping them and it's not helping you. So I would say that, like, when it comes to family, the best thing you can do is say, okay, you know me, you know who I am. It's not like this information is coming from a person you don't know. It's not coming from some rando. I'm this person that you love, so you should take my word for what it is. And then in terms of microaggressions, I've heard a lot. Like, what my favorite thing to hear is like, wow, you're so well spoken for a Black girl. Like, wow, people see my name and they're like, what? And it's like all the assumptions that just come with what a person looks like or what their name is. It's disgusting, honestly. Um, but I come here, you might not think I can speak, but I end up being the best speaker in a room. You might not think that I can articulate because I'm Black, but guess who can articulate? And it's just like the best way to like put someone down is by showing them up, in my opinion. If people want to have preconceived notions because of what your name is, what you look like, where you come from, the best thing you can do is blow their expectations out of the water and really like baffle them with how great you are.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I really felt empowered by that.
Yeah. Something I talked about last week too is really popping the bubble of misconceptions, because people oftentimes they hold these misconceptions about groups of people because they have those single stories. As the author, I don't know if you guys have seen that TED talk, but she also wrote the book, what was it, For the People? I forgot. But basically, she was talking about that issue of single stories and how oftentimes people keep those stereotypes because they're constantly told this one narrative of what people are like. And so sometimes, for example, you'll hear like, oh, well, Black people need to be able to do this. They need to be able to fight for themselves. They need to, like they're telling you all these different things about Black people as if they know what Black people, who all Black people are, what Black people have been through. But they're told these like lies about, they're told these bad narratives. So I think popping that bubble, popping those misconceptions definitely will hopefully help to give a different perspective.
Yeah, and I would say like in order to pop those bubbles, we have to like go out and meet the people that we have these misconceived notions, these stereotypes of, so that we can get to know an actual person and not like a caricature of who they are and like what this one race is like, and that kind of stuff. So like just getting to know people is very important, and like for who they are and not who we believe they're going to be.
I want to share a question from Karina. Where is the line between cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation? Or even if is there one? Do you think we should have one, or how to tackle that, or to tackle that? Oh, never mind, that's somebody else. What do you all think?
I feel
Where's
like
the line between cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation?
so my whole thing with this like topic and this question is like everybody wants to be Black until it's actually time to be Black. That's what I think of a lot, because everybody was like, "Oh, this girl has big lips. That's ugly." And then what did everybody start doing? They started overlining their lips. And it's just really it's offensive, honestly, because there is a big commodification of Black people and Blackness, and everybody wants to commodify Blackness until it's time to actually be Black. I feel like you can appreciate other cultures. Like Kim Kardashian, this everyone loves Kim Kardashian for this, but she got cornrows, and everyone was like boxer braids, and they acted like it was this whole new trend. And that's a perfect example of cultural appropriation, because she took something that was not from her culture and just tried to market it as like she marketed it as if that's something brand new that she just came up with. And it's very easy to appreciate cultures without being part of them. Like if like a Black person who's not directly African or even a white person wants to wear dashiki, that's fine. That's amazing for them, honestly. Because I don't own dashikis, I don't own Ankara fabric, I don't own the culture, but it's the fact that you acknowledge where it comes from, you acknowledge its history, and you're not kind of parading it as something that is not your own. That's where I feel like the line between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation is. You're appropriating something when you either when you want to be part of that group without acknowledging anything else from that group, or you just take something from that group and market it as if it's your own thing. That's appropriation. But appreciation, I can be like, okay, I know where this is from. Like if I want to get a kimono, it's cool. I know where it's from. I understand its history, its culture, its heritage. And I'm not acting like it's something brand new that I just came up with. And I think that cultural appreciation is wonderful and should be celebrated. I think that reaching into different people's cultures and learning about them through a number of different ways, that's amazing. I think everyone should be able to do that. But you kind of just have to walk that line between appropriation and appreciation.
Yeah, I mean,
And I would remind people that Brooke Shields did that back in the 70s. Some of those of us on this call of a particular age remember Brooke Shields and her braids. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Joel. I'm
no,
sorry.
it's all good. I was gonna say that to build on that, like I kind of think it's like a line that everyone individually kind of makes themselves, and that the people that are either trying to appreciate or do something need to understand how everyone else will feel about it. Because depending on what the culture is and what the experiences of the people behind the culture, something will be taken as appropriation versus appreciation. One example, the personal example to me, that I view it as appreciation versus if it was African American Black culture might be appropriation, is this guy on Instagram called Chino Bachatero. So he's an Asian American guy that sings Dominican music in Spanish, and it's like just funny videos. And his whole Instagram is singing these songs in Spanish, and he doesn't talk about the history of bachata, doesn't talk about nothing. It's just comedy, and he has no direct link back to the Dominican Republic. But the Dominican community, and at least myself, we find it entertaining, and we find it as a way to showcase a music genre that we're proud about, and he's kind of like embraced in the culture. Now, that doesn't mean that that should apply to every other aspect of culture, but it just shows the fluidity between how the people that define a culture are either you know define it as appreciation or appropriation. So I don't think there's like a line and a way for us to really define it, but it's really like how does it make people feel.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to move to our closing comments. So, each of you, please give us your profound statements to leave our guests with for the evening. Let's say, Ali, you can start.
Dang, I ain't got no time to think. No, I'm just kidding. I think just something that came up a lot tonight is just to embrace like who you are and like the way that you have been created and loving yourself there, learning to love yourself. I think part of that process is learning about your history, because like knowledge is power, and I believe that's true when it comes to ourselves as well. And so yeah, just like learn to love yourself, and it is a journey. And so if you're not there yet, that's okay, but like I admire everything that everyone has said tonight, but Tanelli, Emoji, and Ghana, and I mean, y'all all have just dropped so much knowledge. So yeah, just also surrounding yourself with people who also love and embrace you for who you are. I'm gonna keep it short. There we go.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I agree. I think a major point in this for me is spreading the message of love. So that's including self-love and coming to people from a place of love. Coming to people from a place of I want to understand you. I want to be able to talk to you civilly, and for us to be able to dialogue and understand each other better. And you will not get along with everyone. You will not agree with everyone, and that is okay. But we are all here. Like, we all share this space called Earth. So, like, might as well spread the love,
Thank you. Very good. Next.
I'll just add that it's all, to me, it's all about progress, and the little things matter, and the small conversations that you have with the people in your direct circle and your day-to-day life can have a really big impact. So just because the past has been a certain way and colorism exists and it is where it is today, doesn't mean that the future has to be like that. And like little by little, through the interactions that we have with each other and the people in our lives, we can make good progress.
Thank you. Ghana, Emoji.
I would just say that we have to be very aware of what it is we want and what it is that's around us. So when you walk into any room, when you walk into any situation, pay attention. Is it a diverse room? Why not, if not? And how can you make it a diverse room in every way that you can think of? So we're talking not just about Black, white, Latino, etc., but gender, age, diversity of thought. So I would just encourage you to, if all the rooms, if every party you go to is all one homogeneous look, why is that? And how do you want to change that to make this world better? I always think about nature. I love roses, I love red roses, but if there were nothing but red roses in the world, it would be so boring. Like I need my stargazer lilies, I need my beautiful daffodils and yellow and orange. And so I will just revert to what I put in the chat earlier. Diversity is our strength and our beauty.
Very well said. Moji, you have the last comment. How about that?
Well, last but not least, so just some like little crumbs of thoughts to take away. Although this conversation is ending tonight, that doesn't mean that the conversation has to end tonight. And one key takeaway that we can all take is just be cognizant. Be cognizant of your own thoughts, be cognizant of the thoughts around you, and be cognizant of the people around you. Because the people around you can have a profound impact on not just you, but the world that you're living in. And sometimes you have to have those difficult conversations, but they're necessary, and difficult conversations are what drive progress. And another, like on the self-love train, radical self-love is just something that we all have to take away from this. Radical love for your fellow man, because we all do share this same earth, and we should never stop learning about ourselves, learning about the world around us, learning about others.
Well, some people are in space. I don't know. Some people are in space. But I'm going to throw it over to our fearless leader for this event, Anna, to help to just close us out.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, and Ghana, Moji, Ali, Tanelli, Joelle, Dr. Pritchett, you yourself, Dr. Harris. Thank you so, so much for, being part of this panel, being part of this conversation. I hope that you all have the time to look through the comments. If you were speaking, you probably don't, but please take the time, look at them. They're absolutely incredible with students sharing their own stories and sharing their thoughts as you guys were speaking. To everyone in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. This is not the last conversation we want to have about this. Like Moji said, be cognizant. And as Ghana said, if you see that there is no diversity, how do you want to change that? On Thursday, we will be tackling gender and sexuality in the lens of the Black identity and Afro-Latino identity. So I know that one of our fearless student leaders, Jalen, they dropped the link into the chat box. So if you have not registered for that event, please do. But again, to the audience and to the panelists, thank you for your time. This has been a wonderfully, hopefully eye-opening event for everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your night.